every semester, my students had to go find a black man over 40 and basically chronicle his life. And we put it up on the blog for people to see. They had to get a picture and they had to do this interview, and they basically had to transcribe the interview and post it up. One, they find it hard to find black men over 40 that they can interview. That was one of the biggest problems. Two, the other problem I had, I didn't see coming. It was complaints from women online that this man, not that he was interviewed, but that that the interview wasn't structured in a way to denigrate him. Ex-wives, ex-girlfriends, old friends, people we work with. That nigga, he shouldn't be written about. He ain't this, he ain't that. And really the assignment is just an interview about his life. Where is he from? What did he experience? How does he feel? The fact that he was being engaged just on humane terms and the interview wasn't structured and reliant on his denigration was offensive to a lot of the women that were writing in. Eventually, we kept doing that. And then Heavy D passed away, the rapper. I grew up listening to Heavy D. I grew up with him. He was only a few years older than me. His masculinity was always a little different in hip hop. It wasn't overly, machismo. He just seemed like the kind of brother you would want to hang out with. Real cool and down to earth. I've heard that's the case. I've never met him. But when he passed away, it hit me because I had so much respect for him. So I wrote my first blog piece about him. And that began an evolutionary process for me to really kind of work on this unspoken thing that I didn't know how to articulate about black men. And it's still going to this day, but it evolved into the YouTube channel and into my upcoming book with Rutledge coming out in August. I took my son to his first college orientation at this California school. 75% of the incoming students for next year were female. I took a picture of, now how they have a table, you pick up your tags. I took a picture of it and I put it on Facebook. The only tags left on the table after everybody was sitting in the auditorium were tags for males, tags for Spanish speakers, and then there was a whole list of tags for those who were non-binary. What that meant was the majority of people sitting in the room were primarily female, right? Those were the majority of the tags. There were no female tags left on the table. And when I walked in the auditorium, 75% of the students in there, if not 80, female. I saw 3 black males, including my son. And even when I looked for males across race, it was like needle in a haystack, right? Now, I'm not saying every school is like that, but I did a show on Howard not too long ago. It is like that in a lot of places, Howard included. An accusation can be damaging, but we're also in the era of Johnny Depp. We're also in the era of Jonathan Majors. We're also in the era of, what's Carly's last name? We're in the era where the argument, listen to all women, believe all women, is not, there's finally a public kind of acknowledgement that might be a little irrational.
Wait, what? We went from not listening to them to now it's ridiculous. Like that believe women. It's like all of them. How about 85%? I'll give you 87%, all right? But that last 13% that keys your car, lights your shit on fire, and puts a family pet in a pot of stew? Who put a pet in a pot of stew?
Glenn Close.
Oh, Glenn Close, yeah.
Okay, all right. I think it was a separately boiled.
You know what I miss, tougher parenting and evidence. Those are the things that I miss from my childhood.
Evidence?
Yeah.
You mean
due process?
Right.
Somebody says something happened and then someone else goes, well, I said it happened this way, like the old Gumshoe shows. Then they had to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't exist now on social media. It's just it's just frontier justice.
Right.
You feel how nervous everybody just got in here? The fact that I just suggested that there should be due process? This guy's talking crazy, man.
Listen to women, yes, but we still have to have evidence. We still have to have this notion of believing all women, and that's the end of the discussion. I mean, you got black men that have been in their graves for decades that are now being reframed as sexual aggressors, and they're not even here to defend themselves. But what happens when you have an 18-year-old boy going into a space that's predominantly female? Any accusation can end his academic career, and it doesn't even have to go off campus to the police. It doesn't even have to require evidence. My mentor taught me back in the early 90s, said every 17-year-old girl that walks across this campus has your career in her hands. If you have a meeting with a student and close your door and she says, he said this, especially if you didn't, what leg do you have to stand on? So I'm just saying, in this environment, and that doesn't work the other way. I can't call it, and say, well, this 17-year-old girl said X, Y, and Z to me in my office. Even the university will look at you like, okay, whether I'm lying or telling the truth. It's a one-way dynamic. I can talk to you about brothers that have dealt with every race of woman, but especially black women that have gone through something very similar. I got a professor brother of mine who can no longer teach in his field because of a false accusation and a frustrated ex-girlfriend who called his job and told everybody at his job that he did X, that he didn't do. It required no evidence. They fired him on the spot. He can never teach in his field again after working through a doctorate, all because she was upset. So we look at Jonathan Majors. She accuses him at the behest, in many ways, as they say, of a police officer who's interviewing her and suggesting to her that he must have done these things to you, and she seems to go along with that. And then we find video evidence that there's no way possible that he could have committed those crimes. That she shows up in the club a couple hours later doing fine, feeling fine, right? But it took those video clips for people to step back and say, okay, well, maybe he's innocent. In the meantime, he's lost so much momentum on his career, nobody cares. I don't know how many of the deals he had set up have called him back, apologized. Hell, they didn't do it to Johnny Depp for the longest. I don't know if they're gonna do it for Majors, but to the extent that Majors is emblematic of black men, or men in general, the question is, what kinds of protections are there, especially in environments that are already hostile to young black men? The problem is a lot of people don't tend to believe that black males and females have a different quality of life. They have a different set of options made available to them. They have a different road in society. The idea is, if we're all black, we grew up in the same house, what I experience is what you experience. The only time I see this really break, and I think I said this to you before, is when I see mothers of sons. Mothers of sons will be the first ones to say, oh shit, this is something, or you'll find mothers who have a daughter and a son. And she'll be like, okay, these are very different experiences. But she's grown up in a family with brothers and sisters. It never dawned on her until she had a son. You know what I mean? And that's kind of where you see this slow acknowledgement that the fact that we're all black is not clarifying enough. We've talked about how gender adversely affects women and girls. We assume that that's the only group gender adversely affects. We have no vocabulary for how gender adversely affects men and boys. So when boys interject it, they're dismissed because their gender experience doesn't reflect women's gender experience. So it must not be happening. It's not until usually you see a mother of a son who's watched this boy grow up from birth and start to go through things that she hasn't had to, that other girls her son's age hasn't had to. Then she starts to say, something's going on here. I showed a film, I think it's still on YouTube. I showed that in class. My young men went nuts. And then another man sitting next to him was like, yo, this is my cousin. Another one's like, that's my auntie. And you saw a number of these men, and they weren't yelling, they weren't screaming. They were just like, nah, that's my mother. You know what I mean? And they started to tell stories about divorce and family court and not being able to see their fathers, and sisters getting into fights with them, and girlfriends calling the police on them just because they could. And you saw this in this moment. The young women that were in the class were looking around like, what the hell is going on? And it was almost like, this is the other side of the scale that I couldn't get 3 or 4 years ago. I'm well familiar with the feminist complaints. I've been hearing them for 4 decades. What I'd never heard was this. So as the men started to talk, then we started to actually have conversations about, okay, what is it you're actually going through at home, at school, and in intimate relationships? And the more they started to talk, what we noticed is the feminist vocabulary we had was not flexible enough. It didn't have enough nuance to engage men. And so then it became clear that we needed a new vocabulary. So around this time is when I meet Tommy Curry, and he and I are very much in alignment about this need. And we're coming at it from different experiences, but we're very much in alignment in terms of this need.
Hey, if you've made it all the way to the end, please click that like and subscribe button. Also share this with somebody that you think would gain value from it. Click the thumbnail at the top if you want the full video. Click the thumbnail at the bottom if you want a video that's closely related to this. Again, like, share, subscribe. Appreciate you guys for watching. Check out some more of our content, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.